as we go through these weeks, and we're talking about the Charlie Kirk legacy, and we're talking about, and we're here in Charlie's studio. I'm next to his chair here, and one of the things that Charlie really went in on was no tax on tips, and he really was so focused on, and not just that issue, but among others, he was so focused on the working class. But he didn't call it that, of course. He called it the muscular class. He would say those guys who have to take a shower before work and after work, and he had so much love for this group of people that had really been given the short end of the stick for so many years in this country, and wanted to help them economically to achieve that wage growth, the home ownership, and really just fought for it as much as he could. So we wanted to bring you on today because I know we have some numbers to report, and I just know that Charlie he's on assignment with God right now, but I'm sure he's looking down and smiling at some of the wins that have really been coming out that he fought so hard for.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And when you talk about the working folks, President Trump is a builder, and he understands that because when he built buildings, he worked with all the people that were part of it. That's who he was comfortable with. Without naming names, I actually know a gentleman who worked with the Trump organization for years, and he always said that the president was a huge patriot, and it was the common folk who he bonded with, which is kind of interesting, right? Because you don't think someone as successful as a billionaire is like that. And the same thing with Secretary Besant, if you read his history and how he was working as a kid at a very early age, hustling. And, so the president clearly understands how important it is, as Charlie did, to do what we can to lift the after-tax wage rates for U.S. workers, the backbone of the economy, we like to call the blue-collar workers. And under President Trump, we're seeing now through the first 8 months of the administration, now is actually the fastest growth in real wages, over 1% than any administration in the last 60 years, if you look at the first term. And the bill that was passed, as you highlighted, the no tax on tips is important, but it also includes no tax on overtime. Jack, that's going to encourage people to enter into the workforce, produce more for people. It's going to lower inflation. And then, of course, even working seniors, they're going to get a tax break as well. So all these things that Charlie highlighted, the president clearly has those same views, and we're all working in the right direction, which is lifting American wage rates, lowering their cost of living and raising their living standards, especially for the middle and lower income workers. That is central to what President Trump wants to do.
Well, it's something that, just I remember last year, Charlie would, be telling us I'm in the back of the Uber, and I'm telling the Uber driver all about no tax on tips, and I got his address, and we're going to send him a ballot. And he'd be out at dinner somewhere, and he wrote it on all the receipts, vote for Trump, no tax on tips. And of course he was in Arizona, but wherever he was in his travels, that whenever he would meet people who were, Uber drivers, waiters, servers, anyone in that, anyone who, is in an industry where they have tips, right? He made sure to just be one of the biggest evangelists for that, because it's something that, and of course we held a couple events in Las Vegas, and of course Nevada. This is a huge issue, and he would talk about it as much as possible. So, he really made it a high spot of the efforts in 2024, and it's so incredible because we're seeing that take place, but we're also seeing, and again, the wage growth that is coming in for the muscular class now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, unfortunately, I didn't get to know Charlie. I wish I had, but he believed that ideas mattered, and if you had a better idea, he was going to listen to it. And President Trump, with the no tax on tips, knew that was a real important development. And what was a great novel idea that made it, Jack, into the legislation, as you talk about waiters and waitresses and other people that depend on tips for their livelihood, but digital asset creators, content creators, are also now part of this bill, because that's how they earn their money, through voluntary paid tips, or what we call qualified tips. So the YouTubers, the live streamers, the podcasters, all the people that you knew and grew up with, they also now get the benefit of this. So not only is President Trump helping the interior of the economy, the backbone of the economy, he's also gotten legislation passed that take us into and through the 21st century in a way that's going to benefit the U.S. uniquely to everywhere else in the world.
Well, and I certainly appreciate that as a content creator, streamer type person myself. That's really something that is fantastic, and I know that Charlie was a huge part of that behind the scenes to get that included in there, and something that he was always fighting for, because he was always thinking about different pieces of legislation and different ways that he could help. Not, and by the way, not just people on his political side of the aisle or people who agreed with him on every issue, but actual American citizens. And that was the entire point. And I think that's something that gets lost many times in, these framings, not just of Charlie, but in his legacy, but also the president and the administration in general, that these are wins not only for, if you're someone who wears a red hat, if you wear a blue hat, if you wear a camo hat, if you wear a construction hat, construction helmet to work, guess what? These policies are going to help you. And in fact, they're kicking in now and already helping you. And some of the numbers that we're seeing, the job growth that we're seeing, you and I talked before about the new capital investitures that businesses are doing into the United States. And President Trump talks about it every single chance he gets. He says, America is so hot right now. America is so hot. The money's all coming in. And it's actually true, right? It's actually happening. It's not just a marketing pitch, even though he is the best salesman there is, but it's actually coming to fruition.
Well, you need optimism, the animal spirits, as a famous economic quote would say. So the president, as a builder, knows how the economy works, he knows how the private sector works. You're exactly right. One of our earlier conversations, we talked way back about the blue-collar boom that was starting pretty much the minute that the president took office. But we also see much stronger CapEx, Jack, as you allude to. We're at almost a 15-year high or close to it in terms of capital spending. We've yet to benefit fully from the full expensing of capital equipment. That is going to continue to engineer much faster investment by companies. When companies invest more, they can produce more, they make more profits, and they can pay their workers more. In addition, because President Trump's a builder and he wants to make things, and factories and reindustrializing and reinvigorating the manufacturing base, which was really depleted and exhausted under both Democrats and Republicans, this revival, this golden age, if you will, now can start because of the president's forward-looking policies, such that companies are going to make and build things here, and they'll be made by American workers. They will be employed by American workers. And Secretary Besson as well has made this point. What will that mean? It will mean rising wages for everyday Americans. As the Secretary has said many times, Wall Street has done well, and we'd like Wall Street to do well, but this is mainstream's turn. They need to do well. That was the overriding, unique characteristic of the first Trump administration, where middle and lower class families outperformed the upper end. They had the biggest wage gains, real wage gains they had essentially in history. In basically the first 3 years of President Trump's first term, you had something like 2 to 3 times the cumulative gain in the prior 16 years. So the president knows what makes the economy work, and he's got great people like Secretary Besson to put his policies in place. And Jack, the best news is still ahead. 4% GDP nearly last quarter. Looks like we may be at 4% this quarter. I'm just super optimistic on the outlook.